I am someone, I want to be proactive with my health. I want to catch imbalances before they spiral because I've been in the other end of the spectrum. When I quit birth control, I had horrible symptoms for 4 years after stopping. I had really, really bad acne that no topical could fix. I was getting monthly facials. I was cutting out every single food in the book and none of it was working. And so finally my doctor just basically, or my dermatologist basically said, like, the only option is for you to go back on birth control. And it just left me so defeated and so stuck. Hello, welcome back to another episode of She's in Sync, the podcast where we're looking to have a safe and confident transition off of birth control and heal their hormones naturally. Today, I'm going to be sharing the top 3 non-negotiable labs that I run on myself to this day every single year, at least every single year. Sometimes I run them multiple times a year, depending on what data I find or what my symptoms are looking like. And the reason I wanted to share a podcast episode about this, or make this podcast episode rather, is because I have a lot of clients who, when they're done working with me or when we're nearing the end of our time, or most of the time when we're getting started and they're feeling better, our brains start to like kind of go to, well, what happens like if those symptoms come back, especially if you have been dealing with symptoms for a long period of time, you've seen multiple providers, you've gone to your doctor, you've been dismissed, you've been told birth control is the only option, or a hysterectomy is the only option, or Accutane is the only option for your acne. You can get really stuck in this cycle. And most women are struggling for so many years before they find me and are getting very surface level support. And then when they work with me, we're uncovering those deeper layers that had been undiagnosed or, left uncovered for so many years, or that birth control masked. And then, we're hitting those root causes and we're healing those root causes and they start to feel better. So it's a good thing. And their brains start to go to, well, what if this happens again? Or how do I prevent this from happening again? And this led me to create a new way for clients to continue checking in on their labs, which I'll get to at the very end of this if you've been a past client of mine. And something that my clients have appreciated so much. So that being said, the reason I want to talk about this is because healing is always changing. What worked for me and what I focused on in my hormone healing journey after birth control is very different, 2 years ago compared to what I'm doing now. And a lot of things I built on, a lot of things I changed, my life has changed. And healing isn't stagnant. Our lives aren't stagnant. And so we have to not just look at health as like, okay, I'm always going to eat, this way, or I'm always going to take these supplements. These are what I'm going to need for the rest of my life. Most of the time, it's not set in stone like that. And a lot of us, type A individuals, we like concrete data, we like plans, we like consistency, right? And so it can be frustrating when you think about, well, how do I know what needs change? Or how do I know, if old symptoms are popping up, for example, like for me and acne, or for someone else it might be painful periods. If those symptoms start popping up, how do I know what to do about it? And so this is something I personally have learned, that I am someone, I want to be proactive with my health. I want to catch imbalances before they spiral because I've been in the other end of the spectrum where, when I quit birth control, and that really was the start of my hormone healing journey, I had horrible symptoms for 4 years after stopping. So I had really, really bad acne that no topical could fix. I was getting monthly facials. I was cutting out every single food in the book and none of it was working. And so finally my doctor just basically, or my dermatologist basically said, like, the only option is for you to go back on birth control. And it just left me so defeated and so stuck. And in addition to that, I also had really bad anxiety. I honestly don't think I knew how bad the anxiety was. I just have always been more of an anxious person. But, looking at when I stopped birth control, like I distinctly remember just like obsessing over just really obsessing and ruminating over things that I normally wouldn't. Like, I would be so scared that my alarm wouldn't go off in the morning. And I would like, almost like OCD-ish, I would like check it multiple times. I would check the volume. Like, I just panicked about that because I was so scared I would like miss work or I'd miss an appointment or, something like that where I'm like, okay, I clearly see my alarm's on, my volume's up. Like, there's no way I'm going to sleep through that. I'm a light sleeper, but my brain would just ruminate on those types of things. And then I also had an ovulatory period. So I was bleeding right away when I stopped birth control, but I actually ovulate even though I was doing everything right. So this is a huge thing. Like most of my clients, they're doing everything right. So if you're in that book where you're eating healthy, you're exercising, you're working on stress support, you're taking supplements that you have been told are helpful, like magnesium or zinc or a prenatal, and you're still consistently dealing with hormonal symptoms, that's where the functional testing comes in because it will really give you that data and uncover what has been masked for so many years, whether you're on birth control or looking to stop. And this is a reason why, speaking to the birth control piece, I'm so passionate about helping women proactively prep their body to stop birth control. So that way they aren't chasing these symptoms and dealing with these symptoms for 4 years like I was, because these things can be prevented. And again, if birth control isn't part of your story, you've been off for several years and you're still dealing with these symptoms, all of this still applies. The functional testing is so important because that's what truly gave me information and answers that no doctor or no coach or no dermatologist could give me. And so once I had that data, it really helped me know what foods do I need to focus on, what supplements are actually going to move the needle, because I wasted so much money on supplements I didn't need that were recommended to me, that just didn't fix anything, which is unfortunate. So, um, that not only helped me back then, but is something that I still to this day use as a pulse check. So I personally, and I'm going to try and say this way, like I'm not bashing doctors, but they are not the experts in women's health unless, we're talking about like a Jolene Brighton or something. So I personally, I'm trying to like censor myself, but I'm just going to like say it. I hate going to my annual doctor's office because it's like the labs that they run are they don't give me any information. Like now that I've run these labs in myself, and that's why my clients are asking me, like when we go over their labs, they're like, how will I know if these things are off? Like you run things that I've never even heard about before or that make so much sense and have connected the dots in so many ways. Like, how am I going to get this information? And before I created this new service, I was like, well, like reach back out and we'll like figure it out, because they've experienced the same thing. Like when they go to their doctor, their labs are basically, they're told that they're normal, even though they feel awful or they're dealing with symptoms, or they're told like, everything is fine. Like there's nothing else we can do, or that's just part of being a woman, or they aren't running the right labs too, where, for example, thyroid, like most doctors just run a TSH, but like that gives me no information about how the thyroid is functioning. Like I want to see antibodies, I want to see reverse T3, free T3, T4, because that gives me a better picture of like, how is the thyroid actually functioning, which is essentially your metabolism. So that's just one example. And then there are things like copper, ceruloplasmin, zinc, things that aren't typically run that give me a lot of information, like specifically related to helping women transition off birth control, but then also helping women heal their hormones naturally. Things like painful periods, acne, missing or irregular periods, mood swings, anxiety, that doctors just don't have education on. And so, when we're looking at these labs, again, it's about like getting a pulse check yearly because things change, your stress changes. You might move, you might change relationships or jobs, like you might have gotten pregnant, you might have had a baby, you might have had, so many things can happen. And that's why I always tell people like your life isn't stagnant, so then your health isn't stagnant. And so because of that, we want to be continually assessing our health. And when I say that, we aren't looking for perfect labs. Like that's one thing I have had to check myself on. I always tell that to clients, like we're not looking for perfect labs, it's just data. And that's been something that I've had to check myself on, especially with my gut healing journey, because it's been a journey. And it's something that, in my mind, I understand why my clients feel this way, or why you might feel this by listening to this, of like, well, what if this gut bacteria comes back, or like, and then my acne comes back. And there are just so many things. All of our systems connect together, which is why I'll be breaking down, which I'll get to. I'm kind of babbling here, but which I'll get to, the 3 labs, because we can't just assess, for example, like skin with just a, a GI map, right? Because there are so many different facets to it. So we want to look at like mineral testing to see, how's stomach acid. If stomach acid is low, then that could result in H. pylori overgrowth, and stress makes H. pylori, you know, more likely to grow because it can negatively impact stomach acid. So all these different things interplay. And so you want a plan that is tailored to where you are right now and also fits your lifestyle. Like maybe you're traveling a lot and you really need some basic foundational supplements, or maybe your labs are like really, really good and you don't need a lot of changes compared to your initial protocol, versus when you started, you had a lot going on. You had a lot of layers that we were piecing together that we needed to phase through to heal your skin, heal your periods, heal your mood, etc., or to help you transition off birth control without those symptoms popping up. So we don't want to chase perfect labs, but we do want to identify and correct imbalances, major imbalances, before they spiral. So again, this is something I would recommend doing once a year at least. I sometimes, depending on like with my HTMA, I did it, I've done it once a year, but my GI map, I've done a couple of those each year. And I'm very lucky because I can obviously order those and interpret them. And to me, it's worth it because that has helped me in my healing journey. So without further ado, let's get into what the tests are that I run on myself every single year, minimum, and that I recommend my clients do as well for a pulse check. So the first one is the comprehensive stool test. So this is the GI map, because birth control, stress, poor diet, not eating enough, just being exposed to quite literally just things in our food system and in our water, like your gut is just always like, it's just so important for so many different facets. Like there's the mood and gut connection, it's the skin gut connection. Of course, if you have digestion issues or food allergies or something like that, it's really important. But this test assesses if there's like, how are you digesting food? So I know for a lot of my clients and myself, like low stomach acid is something I mentioned. And if you're not digesting food, you can't absorb the nutrients from food, or you can't digest it and, properly digest the protein from the food that you're eating. So this also goes into, well, why is your stomach acid low? Is it stress? Is it something like H. pylori? Is it something like, low minerals? What's going on here? And so that's where we look at these markers and then we connect it to the other labs. So this GI map shows, the stool test shows, how are you digesting your food? If there's any inflammation. So I know on my first GI map, my anti-gliadin was high, which essentially meant that I was sensitive to gluten. So for 6 months, I did personally go on a gluten-free diet, or like gluten-free lifestyle. I hate the word diet. And by the way, if you're looking for good gluten-free products that like actually taste good, like feel free to message me on Instagram. I have like a whole list I send my clients because I've been there and I like food. So I'm happy to share that list with you if you want products. But so I did that for 6 months, and that's not necessarily something you have to do long term. A lot of my clients don't have to, but at that moment in time, my gut had so much inflammation. I also had food poisoning on my first GI map. I had H. pylori. I had poor digestion. So there was a lot of stuff going on. And that could have led my body just to be more reactive. Because I always say, like, it's not usually about the food. It's what is the environment the food is landing in. So if my gut was already inflamed and I'm ingesting gluten, it's just going to become more inflamed, but it may not be the gluten itself. So on my subsequent, over the last several years, I've had like 4 GI maps run. I've run them on myself. And the subsequent 3, the anti-gliadin was low. and I was consuming gluten. And so it would have shown if I was sensitive to it. Because after that 6 months, I started going gluten-free light, and then I got more comfortable with it because my skin was being fine. So, I recently did one, and it showed low anti-gliadin. So to me, that shows, okay, I can have gluten and I'm not sensitive to it. But my first GI map, if I would have just gone off that one, I would have just probably continued to avoid gluten because I would have been scared to reincorporate it. So that's a good example how it's ever evolving and ever changing. It'll also show, of course, if there's bad bacteria overgrowth. And this is one that I find very fascinating because using my own GI maps, because I've been the one I've seen the most of my GI maps, obviously. Most of my clients are, doing as many as me. But because I have had chronic stomach, issues, I've run multiple on myself. And each time different things have come back high and low. So, H. pylori was one. It was very sticky for me. I had to go through multiple protocols to finally eradicate it. I just finally, after a little over a year and a half, successfully eradicated it in myself. I will say that is not the case for most people, but I have been my hardest client to date, which is a blessing and a curse. So it was a learning experience, but this is also something to normalize that bodies are different. Like, you might have to pivot and you might have to try something a different way. It's not always like a one and done scenario. And I think that's really important when you're treating the root cause, because it is a time investment, it is an energy investment, it is a financial investment to do it. And it's something that it makes you feel better and it will genuinely last. But it's not an easy button. It's not an easy button of like, take an antacid, take birth control, get these laser treatments for your skin or do Accutane. But we're getting to the root of it. And it's something that is going to set you up for success long term. But there are ups and downs with healing, which is, another important piece that I wanted to convey in this. So it shows bad bacteria. It will also show good bacteria too. And that has been back and forth for me. So my first couple of GI maps, like I had pretty good bacteria. A lot of it was actually overgrown. So I just had like an inflamed gut and an overgrown bacteria in my gut in general, both good and bad. That was pretty consistent for my last couple of GI maps. But then this one, after I did the last killing protocol I did, it was my commensals, my good bacteria were lower, which was interesting. So now I know, okay, like I need to focus on probiotics. Like my gut's in a much better place. The H. pylori is gone. My digestion is better. So now I need to focus on rebuilding that beneficial bacteria. But I would have not assumed that because my previous GI maps, basically said like you have enough good bacteria. So good information of what you need to focus on. Not everyone needs a probiotic. In this moment in time, I do. And it will also show, I know I mentioned this a couple of times, but the inflammation in the gut. So this is, if there's reactions to gluten, it can also show if there is, food poisoning as well. And that's a really common one. I can't tell you how many clients I do their GI map and they have food poisoning and they don't even realize it because that's so easy to get. Like food poisoning isn't just like you're doubled over on the toilet, for a day. Like food poisoning can be just like you have some low grade diarrhea or you have some like nausea randomly. You might not even know it. And especially if you have gut issues, that just might be your normal. So you might not even like realize it. But that's one that's like pretty common. And that gives us information too of like, if you're constantly getting, the bad bacteria and you're constantly getting like food poisoning and stuff like that, like we need to rebuild your gut. Like we need to strengthen that gut immune system for sure. So you're not as susceptible. So that's the first lab that I run is the comprehensive stool test, the GI map to assess gut health. The next one is the mineral test. So minerals are the MVPs. They're important for digestion. I mentioned that earlier. They're important for detoxification. They're important for inflammation, for hormone health. And birth control depletes so many vitamins and minerals. In fact, all medications, deplete certain vitamins and minerals. So that's where it's really, really important to work with the dietitian to determine like, okay, what foods do I need to focus on if you are on any medications, or what supplements do I need to incorporate? Because it's not going to be the same for every single person. Also, stress depletes it if you're malabsorbing. If you're malabsorbing your food or maldigesting food, like we just talked about, also that can impact minerals. And the mineral testing I do, it shows 3 months worth of data. So it shows what's happening inside the cell. It shows your stress response. It shows, how is your thyroid focus, or how is your thyroid functioning on a cellular level? How is your adrenals? Are they fast? Are they slow? It can give you indications in the blood work. So it's a really good test to assess overall health. And when you combine it with the stool test and then the functional blood work, which we'll get to next, it's so helpful to get a really clear picture of like, again, what foods to focus on, what supplements to focus on, or what you really don't need. The next one is the functional blood work. So when I started this, I was talking about how like the blood labs my doctor runs, I'm like, they don't give me any information. Like I'm like some of them do, but then I'm like, okay, but I need this and this and this to like fully make sense of it. So the normal panel your doctor runs isn't enough, in my opinion, for optimal health for women's health, especially when someone's coming off birth control, or is off and is dealing with post-pill symptoms or hormone symptoms in general. So this includes a full thyroid panel, a complete iron panel, including zinc, copper, vitamin A, specific nutrients for the skin, mood, and energy, looking at detox function as well. So you've heard me mention a couple different times in all these tests, it's looking at detoxification just in different ways. And I'm also looking at what's optimal for men's health. So for example, I talked about TSH, like running the specific labs, but another example I want to say is like insulin. So many times women have their fasting insulin ran, which is great, but the reference range is like what's considered normal is anywhere from like, I think 0 to like 25 or something. I consider optimal fasting insulin 6 to 6.5. So or 6 to 7, actually 6 to 7-ish, something like that. So a much, much more narrow reference range. Anything below that or above that, I'm flagging and I'm looking deeper into. So that's just an example of if you've been told your blood labs are normal and you still feel bad, like you're still breaking out, your periods are still taking over your life, like you're missing your period and having mood swings and fatigue and brain fog, this is probably why the wrong tests were run or missed. Like your doctor is not going to run a stool test on you. They're not going to run a mineral test on you. And the functional blood labs, they might not have run the right labs that I would personally recommend running to get the full picture. And they might be looking at them from like the reference range of what's normal versus what's optimal for women's health specifically. So this is an example of, making sure you're working with a provider who, one, doesn't treat symptoms in isolation, because everything is connected. All the body systems are connected. For example, acne, it's not just your gut, it's your mineral status, it's your stress, it's, yes, your gut, but then it's also, do you have iron overload? Do you have high copper or low copper? What's your vitamin A looking like? All of those things play into each other and then they all connect. So we have to look at the body as a whole and your symptoms as a whole and you as the whole person, which is important. So this is why I keep checking in on things, because as I've even described with my labs, like my labs have ebbed and flowed with taking different supplements, with focusing on different foods. And so checking in helps me see, what's trending in the right direction? What do I need to pivot on? What do I need to continue? What do I need to change? Or what do I need to add? Or what can I take away? Because I don't want to be wasting money on supplements I don't need. And I don't want to be, putting effort and focusing on things that I don't necessarily need in this moment, right? And of course, we're not looking for perfection. I'm very much looking for someone to, tune into their body and what they need. But this helps prevent my symptoms from getting where they were when I stopped birth control, because my skin is clear 90% of the time. And for me, I know my biggest trigger for acne right now is stress. That's That's the hardest thing. That's the one thing that's really, really hard for me, and I'm working on it. I've been very open about that on this podcast, but I'm getting there. Um, but for someone else, it might be, their painful periods creeping back in or irregular periods. And I always tell my clients, I'm like, don't freak out if you have an acne flare, if you miss a period, if a period was more painful than normal, if you have some anxiety here and there. Think about, we want to look at patterns. And if that's a pattern of every month, this is my periods are bad, or there's getting progressively worse and it's not going away, then that's when I'd say, okay, let's come back to the data. Let's look at the data and see what your body needs. And again, what needs changed, what needs tweaked, what needs added. And that way we know, so we're not shooting in the dark. And, another thing I'll say about that too is going back to the foundations. I can't tell you how many times clients come to me like when we're working together and they'll chat message me and they'll be like, hey, like my period was, after several months of having good periods, they're like, my period this time, like the first day was, I got really crampy again and like my skin broke out and I'm feeling more anxious, and we'll kind of dig into that together. And I'll be like, is there anything that's changed in your life that may have contributed to that? And they're like, no, nothing. And I was like, well, how's stress? And a lot of times they won't. Some of my clients, they're getting better at this because they're like me. It's like, it's harder with the stress piece, but a lot of times they'll be like, oh no, it's fine. And then we'll get to talking and I'm like, this is a thing. Like, you're more stressed at work. You're skipping lunch. I had one client who she stopped doing her mineral mocktails. She was doing like one every other day instead of two per day. And like her symptoms started coming back. And I was like, we need to go back to those foundations. So this is an example of like, we're human. Sometimes things fall off or we start feeling better. And so then we start slacking off because we're like, oh, like I'm healed, right? And we have this plan in place for a reason because our body needs those things. And what we need today might not be what we need in a couple of weeks, or not a couple of weeks. I mean, that's dramatic, but a couple of months or a couple of years, right? So that's why doing these tests and getting that updated data and that updated protocol is helpful and something that I do on myself. Even as a hormone dietitian who's very in tune with her body, is pretty symptom free at this point, and eats healthy, exercises, does all the things. It's still something because I want to be proactive versus reactive. And I honestly just care about my health. Like, that's an investment for me that is very, very important. That's literally my job, and why I spent my whole life like dedicating myself to this career is because health is important to me, and I want to feel good, and I want to, feel confident in my skin, and I want to have periods that I don't notice and don't have to revolve my life around. I don't want to be anxious all the time. So that is an investment for me. I do pay out of pocket for these labs. I get a little bit of a discount on some of them, but like not very much. But it's important for me. And health is an investment. And so for me, that's something that it's worth investing in once or a couple times a year. So if you're a past client and you're listening to this and you're like, ooh, you didn't offer this when I was offboarding with you or when I was graduating, I'm interested. I want to get updated labs. I have created something called the Functional Lab Pulse Check, which is a one-on-one. First of all, you get 2 or 3 labs sent to you. And it, depending on which tier, I have tier 1, which is functional blood labs or the GI map plus the HTMA. You can choose the GI map or the blood labs. Or I have tier 3, which is all 3 of those. So we'll rerun those labs, and then I'll, get your data. We'll schedule a one-on-one call where we review it together, and then we'll update your protocol with like, okay, what foods and nutrients do you need to focus on now? What's going on in your life? There's going to be an intake form that like gives me data of like what's changed or, what's the same, so we can, what are symptoms looking like? Like, is there anything that's popped up that's the same, that's different, that we can dive into, that we can connect the dots to? And then also an updated, supplement list and updated plan. So you have a crystal clear, step-by-step plan of what you need to work on to continue forward in that path, in that journey to healing, or to address and reverse symptoms that have popped back up or have popped up that are new, because that can happen. I had a client the other day who, She said, she was like, I've not dealt with acne before, but, I've noticed some of these things popping up. And I was like, okay, like that's probably related to this, this, and this. Like we're going through a gut protocol. That's normal. Like here's some things we can do. And it cleared up. So something that, old things can pop up, new things can pop up, or things can be layered beneath the surface that we aren't aware of yet until they keep snowballing and then they get big and loud. And then we're like chasing those, and the longer you wait, the longer it takes to feel better. So the functional lab pulse check is available for past clients only, and something I'm offering to VIP graduates. If you're someone who you have not worked with me before, but you are interested in getting the personalized testing, the personalized protocol, maybe you want some one-on-one support with me, maybe you want a lot of one-on-one support with me, then feel free to fill out the application below to work together. We'll hop on a free, completely no pressure call just to chat through what you're dealing with, what your goals are, where you'd like to see yourself in 6 months, what you've tried, what's worked, what hasn't worked, and then determine if working together is the perfect fit. And if it is, which program would be the best fit for you. Or you can feel free to DM me support on Instagram. I'm happy to chat with you in the DMs if you want to have a conversation about that as well. So in summary, I run still functional labs on myself, the GI map, the HTMA, the hair tissue mineral analysis, and functional blood labs yearly, if not a couple times a year, to be proactive versus reactive when it comes to my health, to prevent symptoms from growing bigger and louder, like I said, and to correct those imbalances to feel my best without having to chase those symptoms after they pop back up. So this is exactly what I teach my clients, of listening to your body, being proactive, and really just being in tune with yourself and doing the best thing you can for your health, which is always changing because our life is always changing. So hopefully this was helpful. Hopefully this gives you some insight into, also personally, I think I'm always like nosy of like what other practitioners do, or, what their life looks like in relation to health. So if you're one of those people, if anything, hopefully this was interesting for you. Or if you are interested, again, in getting some testing done for yourself to get to the root of your hormone symptoms, and or have a smooth transition off of birth control and proactively prep your body for a smooth transition, I would absolutely love to connect with you. And until next time, stay nourished, friends.